things the Doermer School of Business is attempting to do is partnership with the business community. This is part of what partnershiping is. It is having participation by these type of individuals that run very successful companies. So I'm going to just give you a little background on our panel today. This panel is kind of a mixture of people in the way that we have older, younger. Leon, you're the younger one down on the end. We have first-generation entrepreneurs. We have second-generation entrepreneurs. We have people that have actually are working in CEO roles in company, but also has an entrepreneurial side, which he will share with you today. So with that, I'm just going to kind of introduce the panel. At my far left, your right, is Leon Habegger. Leon is CEO of LH Industries. LH Industries holds over 50 patents. They are a producer of high-end tool and die work, and they basically are, you may not hear a lot about them because their competition is the world. The companies they compete with are principally in Italy and Germany. Their dies are going into a lot of the production in China. Next, we have Chuck Sirac. Chuck has a great story, which I know you're going to love to hear, but he is very high profile by having Sweetwater. Most of you have probably been there at one time or another, and you know that it is really a state-of-the-art retail facility, but they are the largest online retailer of musical instruments and musical properties. So Chuck has a great story to bring, and I know he's challenged me that we should have a better sales program. Well, yeah, you're agreeing with that, right? Next is Eric Doden. Eric has an interesting story, which again he will share, but he has been not only in the entrepreneurial side of business, but he's also been a public servant. He's been involved in economic development with the governor's office. He's presently CEO of Greater Fort Wayne, Inc. He might have a political vent that occurs once in a great while, but one thing maybe when it comes time to run for a political office, but one thing I've found with these four individuals, they all have a political vent. They may not be quite as open as Eric, but everybody is involved. Lastly is Brian Bauer. Brian Bauer is CEO of Lutheran Hospital, Lutheran Health Network. Very unique. He became CEO before his 30th birthday, and now he just turned 34, has 7,000 people reporting to him. But there is another aspect of his story that I'm going to let him share with you that I think you'll find far more interesting. So with that, I'm going to get started. And Eric, I would like to start with you. And I know you have a very unique situation. You're the only one in the panel that actually was, shall we say, born into entrepreneurial efforts. Eric's father, Darrell Doden, was very successful with Ambassador Steel, and I know guided Eric from an early age. So Eric, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, my story really starts on Oak Street in Butler, Indiana. Do you guys all know where Butler is? It is a wonderful town, but we really, as a family, did not have any background in entrepreneurship. My grandfather was a pig farmer on my mom's side, and my other grandfather was an Iowa farm boy. And actually then, in his late 20s, decided that he was called to be a pastor. and really traveled rural Indiana to be a pastor, and so my dad followed in his footsteps. When I was about 4, one of the elders came to my dad and said, "Daryl, the Lord's calling me to leave the eldership and go to another church, and I think he's calling you to lead a pastorship." And that began a journey for my dad, because my dad realized that he was really not a pastor. That was not his bent. His bent was business. And so what happened was he started doing odd jobs, and to make a long story short, he ran into a situation where there was a shortage in rebar and began a rebar business in 1974. I was 4 years old. So our family started this journey when we were all kids, and we began to grow a company. And to make a long story short, that company grew to about a $600 million business. In 2008, we sold that to Nucor Steel. How many of you guys have heard of Nucor? And we went into private equity. But my journey really began at Hillsdale College, much in the same way that your journey began. You know, when I was at Hillsdale, I did not have any knowledge really of our family business. We didn't really talk about it much. I just watched by example of how people operated. And so when I was at Hillsdale, when I got done, I went into automotive sector and was scared to death, because I was 22 years of age and managing a production line of 15 individuals. Didn't know what in the world I was doing. And then from there, after about a year of that, decided I needed to go back to law school and get more education. So I went back to law school, got done with law school, and went right into business. And that's really when I began my career, from my perspective. I mean, I began my career in the automotive, but this is where I really began to learn about being an entrepreneur. So I inherited a business that was $1.3 million in sales and was losing money for 8 straight years. And over the course of 5 years, I proceeded to lose $2 million more. That was not a fun 5 years for me. How many of you guys would like to lose $2 million of your family's money in a business? Raise your hand. I would love to talk to you afterwards. But after 5 years, I really began to be mentored and coached and realized that failure is part of learning. And I was learning the entire time. But I will tell you, after 5 years, I was done failing. And I was about ready to give up on business, about ready to quit. I literally said to my dad one day, "If this is business, I'm done. I'll go practice law. I can't take it." And he said, "Well, why don't you come in and help us with," at that point, it was a $300 million business, Ambassador Steel, and just start at the bottom and work your way up. And I started in accounts receivable. Now, if you want to learn a business and you want to learn it from the ground up, start in accounts receivable. When you have to collect debts, you learn a lot about the company, you learn a lot about the customers, and you learn a lot about business. So I started in accounts receivable, worked my way up, and what I realized very quickly is that here this big company was profitable, but they had the same problems I had in my $1.3 million business. We just had resources to do something about it. And for the first time in my career, I started having fun solving problems. And here's the fun thing about your career is the more problems you solve, guess what happens? The more problems you get, because they want people that can solve problems. And what I began to realize is that problems were my friends, not my enemy. And then I really started having fun, because I began to realize that failure is a part of success. And I really failed my way to success for most of my career, honestly. I pushed myself to failure and failed my way to success for most of my career. But really, at the end of that time frame, another journey was about to happen. In a family business, often what happens is when you have a big sale like we did to Ambassador, everyone thinks you walked away with millions of dollars. I did not. I had a nice bonus check of about $250,000 on a transaction of $185 million. I did not walk away with a lot of money, although people assumed that I did. And so after about 2.5 years, I announced to my family that I'd be leaving the business and starting on my own. Now, at that time, I was making 6 figures, was making a nice income. All my friends thought I was literally nuts in my head. My wife thought I was crazy, but she signed a 1-year contract that allowed me to start my company. And when we started the company, we had $25,000 to our name in cash, and we had 5 months before we went bankrupt when we started our business in 2011. And I will tell you, yes, I'm crazy. I've now certified, admitted. At first, I used to deny it in 2011 when I started this company. I said, I'm not crazy. Everyone would do this. And my wife said, no, not everyone does stupid stuff like this. But we started a business, and in about 11 months into that first year, we closed our first big transaction, and my wife signed contract number 2, which is for the second year. And we began to grow that business. We're now, we've grown from 0 sales to now we have $130 million of product going up as we speak. We're getting ready to close another $30 million product. But here what I would tell you about success. Again, success is surrounding yourself with the right people, with the right team. is surrounding yourself with people of expertise that, frankly, I didn't have. But it's also about humility and about understanding that you can't just look out after your own interests. You have to look out at the interests of others. And, so we built this, successful business in a 4-year time frame. But at the same time, I remind my wife every day that we're one phone call away from bankruptcy. That's the world that we live in. And that's the challenge. And we wake up every day with that level of humility. So there's a lot of us that sit up here and you think, wow, you've been really successful in life and you've done this, you've done that. I think for me, personally, I can just speak for myself, I've learned more during the times I've failed than I've learned during the times I've succeeded. And I will also tell you that just for myself, that, I've had to learn how to master fear. One of the best things that I learned was courage is not the absence of fear, it's the mastery of it. I have fear every day of my life, but I choose to have faith. I have faith in my partners, I have faith in my community, I have faith in my Lord. That's the way that I live. Now, I'm not saying that all of you are religious, I get that, but I'm just not smart enough not to be religious, to be honest with you. So I just have faith in the United States of America, I have faith in our government, I have faith in our system, and I have faith in the business community, and I have faith in democracy. And that's what drives me every day, and that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Am I under 10 minutes, boss?
Thank you very much, Eric.
Was I under 10 minutes?
Well, you did good.
All right, good. Thank you.
But no, I think that, I hope you listen closely there, because the one thing that is very interesting, success doesn't eliminate concern or fear. And so, one of the best motivators is fear of failure. I always found that works pretty good personally. But you'll get a chance to take a crack at him in the question answer. And I want to move now to the far end to Leon Habeger. Leon, why don't you start by telling them how you originated and the fact that you weren't a tool and die guy all your life.
Yeah, well, my discussion is definitely going to be a lot shorter. Anyhow, I started out as a farm boy, and that's a good place to learn how to really work hard and responsibilities. And at the age of 16, my family, I just had a sister. That was only the two of us, and back then we farmed 260 acres. This is back in the early 50s with the two bottom plows. So when the crops are to be planted and to be taken in, we worked around the clock a lot. And not only that, but we had a lot of milking cattle. I'm only saying that because that's a good place to really learn how to work hard and take responsibility and carry your future from that. We were tenant farmers, so at that time, we lived in an old farmhouse, non-insulated. We were very poor, hardly making ends meet. And at that time, my mother got a job at Eckrich at Fort Wayne, Indiana. As you can still remember, they're still in business, Eckrich Meats, but I think Swift has bought them out now. And it was a wonderful family, and she had a great job. So the handwriting was on the wall that looked like farming was going to be over. And I know at that time my dad didn't want to give up, and a good Swiss farmer and a background, and Swiss people don't give up. I mean, they're very strong-headed. And I know at that time he knew I really liked implements and tractors, and I enjoyed implements, and I was always kept in top shape. And he promised me, he said, Leon, he says, if you stay on the farm with me, he said, I'll get a new John Deere 60. And as strong as my father was, you never say no to him. And God helped me to say no, and thank goodness I said no. So from then, we decided to have an auction, and so we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. At that time, I was 18 years old, and soon after that, I had got married, started a family, and I remember the first job that I had in Fort Wayne, Indiana was Kroger's, and the only reason I got that job is because my first cousin had a pretty good position at Kroger's, so I was stock shelves and also in the evenings be stocking the inventory for the next day. Well, at that time, I was going to Nelson Street Church of Nazarene. And so at that time, I became a strong believer when I was young. And a friend of mine, I said, I'm going to be going to Olivet Nazarene Church to become a minister. And he says, there's going to be an opening at a tool and die shop. I had no idea what tool and die. I'm a farm boy. I thought, is that some part of dye clothing or dye shoes? I didn't have any idea. So he took me over there, and I seen, milling machines, cut-off saws, lathes. I thought, I spent 4 years in high school, Future Farmers America, no shop. And so I looked over there, and here the Sunday school superintendent was the foreman. So it was sort of a shoe-in. But starting there, I was with that company for about 6, 7 years, learning the tool and die trade. At that time, I was developing a niche. Didn't realize at that time it was going to be the future of my company. And that was getting into very, very hard, dense materials, carbide material that goes into very, very high production dies. General Electric at that time, of course, all their lamination dies were being built out of carbide material, the punch, and the die sections that goes into the stamping dies. Well, I started developing that at Thompson Tool and Die where I was working, and I became very well known in Fort Wayne community as the grinding person in Fort Wayne, Indiana. At that time, Fort Wayne Tool and Die was the biggest tool and die plant, and GE wanted them to start getting into carbide. But through complacency, not wanting to change, they didn't do that. So I started developing that at Thompson Tool and Die. Then about my seventh year with Thompson Tool and Die, my mentor, which I really enjoyed as my employer, was J.C. Thompson. Well, he had a cerebral hemorrhage and passed away instantly. So his widow, of course, followed on with the company. And I seen then that probably wasn't going to have much of a future. So at that particular time, I decided, anyhow, there was 3 of us thinking about going into business on our own. And the one individual did the accounting at Thompson Tool and Die, and he went to his brother, which is a CPA, and he said, well, it's going to take 40 or 50 grand to get a company like this started. And at that time, I thought, there's just no way. I got $3,000. How in the world am I going to come up with that? And the other 2 backed out. Then I decided, well, there's no reason you can't start small. So I decided to find a place on Winchester Road. It had an old printing shop that was vacated, 7216 Winchester Road. Now, this is back in 1969. I was 29 years old at that time. Excuse me, 1966. 1966 was the year it started. And it had 900 square feet. I purchased equipment. I had $1,000 in savings, and that was my working capital. And I refinanced my car. It gave me $2,500 cash to put down the equipment, and that was the beginning of my business. But at that time, you all have to know, if you have a family, it's going to chip into your quality of your family as far as the time you're with your family. I had 3 young kids, and I'd be working 12 hours a day, making parts for General Electric, punches and dissections that goes into their complete stamping die. And then the 6 hours I'd spend at the dining room table as everybody's sleeping, estimating for my next job. And then 6 hours sleeping back in. Finally, I was able to hire my first guy in 90 days. And then after about 3 years on Winchester Road, then I purchased a building, or purchased land off of Clubview Drive. That was the beginning of a 60 by 100. 60 by 100, which gave me 6,000 square feet, and I thought, I'll never fill that place up. But fortunately, things kept moving in the right direction, and we had wonderful people. And one thing you realize, you're not the one, it's the people that support you and work for you that really make it happen. And after about 5 years at that location, we were making a lot of die parts for GE on Broadway, and At that time, they had 250 people in their tool room, and they couldn't compete. And about 3 years later, they had to shut it down, so we pretty much got all that work. But during that period of time, our basis was broadening. I mean, they had many divisions down south, Illinois, all over the place. Then about 1978, when we moved, 1974 is when we moved into that building. 1978, we started making the complete die. And fortunately, I was able to get one of the General Electric's engineers, and very, very intelligent guy, and wonderful experience. And that was the beginning then of really our niche in going into full production stamping dies.
How many square feet do you have now, Leon?
Well, altogether with all the divisions and so forth, we have about 300,000 square feet.
So a little more than 6,000.
Yeah. And
How many companies?
Well, we have 5 divisions. I have LH Carbide, 2 LH stamping plants. One's for computer industry, which is very, very high-speed stamping. All Foss Browns brass connectors. Those presses run 1,000 strokes a minute. Then the lamination division is where we have all of our patents. And the patents come from developing product that comes out of our dies. Used to come out loose, now they come out final. The final process are all locked together, and it was a great savings for the electric motor industry. And through these are apparatus patents. It isn't like a patent on the product. It's a patent that we developed in our dies so that globally we wouldn't be copied and make it very difficult to be competitive and so forth.
Leon, to wind it up, I gotta kind of get you to tell maybe one story. I'll help you tell it. But it's interesting when you're building dies that are going into China.
Yeah.
You collect 90% while you're building them.
Yeah. Well,
but that 10%'s out there for 90 days till they run them.
Yeah, one of our divisions is very, very important to us, and that is our controls division. That's our automated division, where you have automated lines. Also, the controls operates our production dies, and without that, you can't run a die. So we just constantly got hit from China. We couldn't do anything to satisfy them on that last 10%. And they'd be running 1 million, 2 million, 3 million parts, never pay us for that 10% that they owed us. And we were just happy for that to be our margin. And so we developed a code in our control. And we never told them about it, so we sent a die. After 1 million parts, the thing shut down. And, of course, they didn't have the code. Man, they got on that phone. I mean, I never heard such language in my life. And threatened us and all that, and I said, we're sorry, you know. But, you know, that you run 1 million parts, your product is, you know, it's past quality. You're on your run now. I mean, you know, you owe us a 10%. Well, in 24 hours, we had the money funded to us in our bank account. And so that's, and we heard other people that work with China, that's one of their things they do at the end. Most people don't even collect. Well, the bank really loved this.
Well, Eric, you said that if you work accounts receivable, you know it all. Leon figured out a surefire way to collect. So I think this shows ingenuity. When you're in a business, you have to look at what your potential risks are. You have to look at what could go wrong. And you figure out in advance how to eliminate that risk or at least minimize it. Leon did a great job on collecting foreign receivables through his control system. So, Leon, we ran your time. Now we're going to Brian Bauer. And don't let him tell you stories about when he was a great football player at Butler University. That's off limits. You can't tell him about that. Go ahead.
Well, I'll be quick. My name is Brian Bauer. I'm CEO of Lutheran Health Network. We've got 8 hospitals, almost 8,000 employees here in Northeast Indiana. I'm 34. I came to Lutheran when I was 29 as CEO of the hospital. Went to Butler, grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana. Father was a policeman. My mom stayed at home, went back to nursing school when I was in junior high. I was always kind of hustling growing up, whether it was baseball cards. I think I had 15 lawns that I mowed. I always remember I would watch the weather when it would snow. I'd be up early. I had kind of houses mapped out in my neighborhood that I knew I could shovel without even asking them, and they would be good for it. My accounts receivable would be good. I could go by later and get the money. And then I would just cold call. I would knock on doors and say, can I shovel your lawn or shovel your driveway? And some would say no, and about every third house would say yes. And they'd say, well, how much do you want? And I would always say, well, it's up to you, because I figured I learned quickly that they would pay me more than if I set the price in advance. So I would come back with like $300 or $400 when I was 8 and 9 years old. My brother would still be asleep at 11 o'clock on a snow day from school. So I always had that. I was always trading baseball cards and different things. In college, I tried to hustle as many internships as I could. I worked at an investment firm. I worked for a law firm. I did an internship in Congress in Washington, D.C. And then I did one at a hospital in accounting, and that one really stuck with me. Loved working in healthcare because you could really connect to mission every day, no matter what you were doing in the hospital. There was always something amazing taking place in a hospital. So built relationships along the way. You know, if I could leave you with one thing, it's build relationships with people throughout your life, because you never know when they're going to come back, where you can help someone or they can help you later in life. But I ended up, when I was 24, I came back as controller of that hospital from my internship in accounting. So I was blessed to come back as controller. Ended up becoming interim CFO when my boss who brought me back left, became CFO, then became CEO of the hospital. We had about 750 employees, about 135, 140 million in revenue. I was 26-ish at the time, 27, and then came up to Fort Wayne to be CEO of Lutheran Hospital. But a side story along the way, when I was controller of the hospital, I had an intern. He went to IU Bloomington, and we were working late one night, and he was on a website. It was for a clothing company, and not many people know this about me, so we can keep it in the room today. But he had this clothing company that his roommate had. He was doing about $30,000, $40,000 in sales out of his dorm room in Bloomington, and it was 2008, 2009, so no one had any money. The world was coming to an end after the financial collapse. And this kid was selling clothes out of his dorm room in Bloomington. They looked pretty cool. I said, if he ever needs an investor, let me know. And it was about 8 or 9 months later. My wife and I and our newborn son, who's now 6, turned 6 last week, were eating sushi in Terre Haute, and I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. It was a Thursday night, and it was Matt Fields, who's now my business partner in this venture. And he said, you don't know me, but my roommate said if I ever need an investor to let you know. And I've since learned that he called his dad before he called me, and his dad said, no, get a real job. You don't want to chase this clothing company. So he called me, and Jay-Z had worn his shirt a couple nights before at a concert in Canada. And a kid posted it online, and demand for the shirt was just incredible. And at this point, he had a storefront at 224 North College in Bloomington, across from the Hilton Garden Inn. The company was called Dope Couture. It's now called Dope. It really doesn't fit my profile, but...
Well, it could.
It could, I guess. Has anyone bought anything from Dope? Last time I was here, there was a kid who had a hat on from Dope. Someone may have, but... I drove down to Bloomington 2 days later. I answered the phone call. That's one thing I'll leave you. I'll back up a little bit. I identified value in a product and built a relationship. I answered the phone call. Then my wife and I drove down to Bloomington. He had a real nice storefront. He had artists coming through when they would have concerts at IU. And my wife and I spent the day there with our newborn, kind of getting to know the business. And I kind of left it. He needed $15,000. I didn't have a whole lot of money. I left that day. I gave him a check for $7,000 and said, we'll work out an agreement next week, an operating agreement. So there was trust in the relationship. We shook on it. There was trust. I wrote him a check out of my personal account. We're now well over $10 million in sales, well into 8 figures in sales. We have a store on Fairfax in Beverly Hills. We have 29 employees and do sales all around the world. And after I wrote him the check for $7,000, I said, well, go talk to a bank. There were 2 banks in Terre Haute, and we'll get a line of credit. In the first bank, I thought if you had a fishing license, they would give you a line of credit. So I taught him how to make a business plan. We went to Kinko's. It was after work one day, and we're assembling this business plan with all these celebrities who are wearing his clothes and trying to impress this bank. And we asked for $100,000. And the first bank that was a slam dunk looked at me like I was crazy, asking for a $100,000 unsecured line of credit for a company called Dope out of Bloomington, Indiana. So I was somewhat depressed going to the second bank, thinking this second bank's never going to say yes. And the commercial lender, I was actually in a leadership Terre Haute group with him, so I'd gotten to know him real well, had a relationship with him, and he said, you know, I think I can get you $60,000 unsecured for your company. That line of credit's now a $4 million line of credit as we've grown as a company. And people we were on The Voice Monday night. Missy Elliott was wearing one of our hats. She's worn it 3 weeks in a row. So it's all over the world. We wholesale all over the world. We retail all over the world, and our store in LA has celebrities through it constantly, and a lot of people who I really don't think very highly of, but they have lots of Instagram followers and Twitter followers. So I'm fine when Justin Bieber puts our hat on and tweets it out to his 30 million people, but obviously doesn't fit with my day job in healthcare, but it's a relationship that I built from an intern who worked for me. I answered the call. We had some moments where, you know, it was tough. We had a longshoreman strike this year, so a lot of our product was stuck on container ships in the port of LA. And in fashion, that's not a good place for your clothes to be when spring is here and your clothes are in a container ship. So there were a lot of ups and downs. We had disagreements. When he wanted to move to LA from Bloomington, I think we were at 400,000 in sales. So life was good for me. You know, we've got a great company in Bloomington. It's growing like crazy. It's making money. Why in the heck are you going to move to LA? And we kind of argued back and forth over it, and eventually loaded up the U-Hauls and went out there without a space to land. Found a space on Fairfax. There was a bookstore and a grocery store next to us. We've since bought both those locations. We shut down for about 4 months to remodel, which was a near-death experience for the company because it's hard to have a cool clothing company in LA when there's no place to walk into. It's just a construction site. We've bought a warehouse and it's tough recruiting talent that really care about the brand out there. You have a lot of people who just want to be seen and give clothes away and hang out with celebrities and different things. So finding people who are really in it at the ground level like Matt and I were has been a challenge out there. And obviously it's an industry that changes real quickly. So I'm happy to take questions on that. Leon mentioned one thing, time away from your family. It takes time. I was on the phone for 2 hours last night on a Sunday night talking about this company, and tonight at 7 o'clock I'm meeting someone for an interview who's going to be a general manager of a restaurant we're opening in Fort Wayne. So if you want to be in this space.
You mean another entrepreneurial venture?
Yeah. It takes time. It takes time away from your family, and you've got to have a spouse who's on board with it. Yes. You absolutely do, because if you don't, you're always going to have that conflict pulling you home. And church is important to us. Being home is important. But when you do get that time at home, you've got to make sure it's quality time, because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're not going to be home for dinner every night at 5 o'clock. And you're going to have things that demand your attention. You mentioned something, you're one phone call away from bankruptcy all the time. So you've got to answer that phone call. You can't say I'm at home and this doesn't matter. You're on call 24/7. So it's not easy, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. And sometimes you get lucky like I did with a clothing company in Bloomington.
I don't think you get lucky, Brian. I think you're good. I have the pleasure of being on the Lutheran Hospital and Lutheran Health Network board, as does Chuck. And so we get to see Brian perform on a regular basis. And I will tell you, if you don't think passion counts, you haven't seen the big guy operate, because I got to tell you, he is passionate about everything he does. And really, that's the word for this panel. They're all passionate. So with that, Chuck, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're taking us home. So You got it.
Well, first off, aren't these guys just absolutely amazing? Hope you're getting a lot out of today. The other thing I would tell you as a musician, sitting here smelling the pizza, they're killing me in this warm room. I'm ready to eat pizza. So. As we said earlier, we should have brought the beer, and then we'd have been real heroes, right? Oh, well.
We should have sold it too.
We should have sold the beer as entrepreneurs. That's right. That's right.
All right.
So you make me go last, Mike, and my story started maybe a little bit earlier than almost everyone's here. 55 years ago, no, that's not right, 53 years ago, I started my first business as a 5-year-old. And I was making pot holders where you put the little loops in the frame at 15 cents a piece, 2 for a quarter I was selling these for. And my goal was to sell enough of them to get a mini bike. And I sold hundreds, and then I sold thousands. I sold so many that I couldn't manufacture them as fast as I could sell them. So I got my younger brother to help me and a neighbor kid. In the little town I grew up in southern Ohio, I sold over 10,000 potholders to a town of 5,000 people. When I couldn't sell them any more potholders, then I started doing other businesses. And like Brian, I had many businesses as a young guy. I had more lawn mowing customers than you did because I actually had 4 other kids working for me. I bought them all brand new Toro lawnmowers, and we had about 80 customers that we dealt with. Yeah, but we didn't do the snow. I never thought of doing snow. That's a good idea. Of course, we didn't have as much snow in southern Ohio. I came from a pretty broken home. My mom and dad got divorced. My mom has pretty serious mental illness. And I don't say that for sympathy, but I share this with you to say no matter where you are, the control is in you. It's up to you. You have the ability to rise above that. I have 4 brothers and sisters, and I would tell you that my brothers and sisters didn't fare as well as I did, yet we grew up in the same home. My brother became a drug addict, spent time in prison, really, really, really tough years. And my escape, I'm sure, was to excel at everything I did. And when I was in Cub Scouts, I had so many arrow points, they went off my shirt and into my pants. And Boy Scouts was very important to me, as it was, I know, for Dean Eichenberry. And a Boy Scout learns that they're trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Maybe a little trite, maybe a little simple, but they are amazing principles to live by personally and professionally. And I teach them to all my employees in the second hour that they're at Sweetwater. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I think they're just amazing principles to live life by. And so I've always chosen those principles. I believe if you're going to do something, do it the best you can. Unlike Eric, I don't believe in failure. And I know it's easy for me to say, but failure is not an option for me. I believe there's always a way. And one of the things that I always teach is put one foot in front of the other. Just keep going one step further, one step further. Perseverance, passion, all the stuff we've already heard today are just powerful, powerful tools. But I believe almost anything you can envision in your mind, I know that sounds big, but can make it happen. So I grew up in southern Ohio, and I moved to Fort Wayne with my parents going into 7th grade, and I went to Ben Geyer, went through high school. When I went to high school, you needed 31 credit hours to graduate. I graduated with 62 credit hours, not because, because I wanted to escape from the house, I'm sure it was part of it, but also because I love learning. And so I took all kinds of summer school, sociology, government in the summertime for fun. Being a musician, I taught myself how to play saxophone and flute and clarinet and keyboards, but I also would do music before school and after school in the jazz band and the swing choir, and all those things added up to credits. But I also was on a dual path trying to figure out, did I want to do medicine? I love children, I wanted to be a pediatrician, or did I want to go do music? And so I took all the required college classes, several years of Latin, chemistry, all the things that I'm sure many of you have taken. And immediately after high school, I went on the road as a musician and never looked back. And I never thought about going to school again. And unlike everyone in this room, I did not go to college. That does not mean I'm uneducated. In fact, I've learned a lot through the years by reading, and by getting lots of help from others and advice and all that sort of thing. But when I was just finishing high school, I told this story to Mike earlier, I used to come to this room all the time, this room in the student union, because I had a band I had been forming and we could use this room to practice in. So that was as close as I ever got to college. One of the guys that I was playing with was going to school here, so that gave us access to these rooms. I came home after being on the road as a musician, and all I had was my VW bus. And I got the VW bus because my mom had totaled the VW bus. And so I fixed the VW bus by buying 2 gallons of Bondo and bondoing in the front of it, and then I bought cans of spray paint from Kmart, 99-cent cans of spray paint, so I painted it baby blue, and that's what I'd used on the road as a musician. And I came home and started a recording studio. I had no money, my parents had no money to give me, but I would pull up beside the local nightclub, the Elks, the student union here, any building, church, school, and I'd run 100 feet or 200 feet of microphone cable into the building. I'm still doing that today. I noticed that all of these microphone cables up here came from Sweetwater, which I really like. At least I didn't have to set them up anymore like I used to. But I would set out in my VW bus with headphones, and I would record the band or the choir or the speaker, whatever it took. And then I would take those recordings from my VW bus back to the living room of my 12 by 60 mobile home that was out by Ossian. And I would mix those musicians, the speeches, whatever they were, and try to make them sound better than they really did. And I would edit mistakes out for them. I'd put reverb or ambience to make it sound like they're in a bigger hall. Sometimes I would even put artificial clapping so it sounded like they had a big crowd they were performing to. And my goal was always to provide more value to the customer, give them more than they had bargained for, or more than they'd paid me for. Down south, that's called lagniappe. That's a New Orleans term to give a little bit extra. And so that's been my goal in everything in business that we do. Whatever we agree to, I want to give the customer a little bit more. I want to give them the advantage. I want to give them more than they bargained for or we negotiated for. I always want negotiations to be a win-win. And a win-win means the customer wins. I've never cared about money. That's easy, to say today, and it's probably hard for you when you're, probably tight on finances and that sort of thing, but I never was driven by money. I was always driven by do the right thing. Do the right thing, the business will grow, and thankfully the money also came. Someone talked about people earlier. I have 10 businesses today besides Sweetwater, so I've started them from scratch. I've acquired businesses. I've saved several businesses that were going out of business. And the thing that I've put in place in every one of those businesses and have turned all of them around was the same customer service skills. It's pretty simple. Treat customers the way you want to be treated. Just a simple golden rule from my point of view, and applying those Boy Scout principles. But I will tell you, no matter what business I'm in, whether it's glasses or helicopter rides or insurance or the Sweetwater that you know about, they're all people businesses. The product just happens to be whatever the services are we're selling, but we actually run the businesses exactly the same. Always, always do the right thing for the customer, do what's right long term. And I just believe if you do that, it applies to just virtually any business. A little story, we're talking about, from my point of view, failure is not an option. Fall of 2008, I'm serving on the board of directors of a local bank, publicly traded bank. General Motors had filed bankruptcy. As a bank trustee, we were having to call bank loans due and tell customers, sorry, you have to pay us off now. And as you can imagine, a lot of them didn't have it, and it was really painful. And our whole country was concerned about what was going to happen. And I went back after one of those meetings and sat in our theater, just a little bit bigger than this one, with 250 of our employees. This was fall of 2008. And I set all the employees down, and I said, as arrogant as this sounds, failure is not an option, and I'm choosing to not participate in this recession. I know those were big, bold words to say, but what it really did, it instilled confidence into my people so they didn't have to look over their shoulder for another job. I wanted them to know that I'd never laid anybody off, and I was not about to lay anybody off. Failure was not an option. So that year we buckled down and we looked at some of the processes we did in our company. I've always believed that you have to continually work on getting better. That's a Japanese word called kaizen, the constant improvement or continual improvement. I don't believe you can stand still. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And I know I don't want to get worse. And I believe that in my personal life. I believe that in my professional life. So through that year of 2008, when companies were filing bankruptcy, closing their doors, laying people off, I had my employees being very confident because they heard from me as a leader that we weren't going to lay people off. They didn't have to worry about looking for a new job or looking over their shoulder. It also was a great year to look at our processes, as I said. And so at that point, we're still doing a couple things on paper, and we quit doing all the paper, made everything electronic. So the only paper that goes out our building today is the final invoice. In fact, half the time they go out electronically and never even do a paper anymore. We dropped a few brands that didn't make sense to our business. We brought on lots of brands. And probably the best thing we did is we started hiring great people because there were great people that had been laid off all over. And so our company continued to grow. And at the end of this year, we'll have been in business for 37 years, and every year, my top line and my bottom line are bigger than the year before. And that's a pretty incredible thing to say. My wife and I own the company completely. We have very little debt. We have no shareholders, no stockholders. I don't have to answer to anybody except my employees, my customers, God, and all those people in various orders. And of course, my spouse, as you heard earlier. But For me, it all is about doing the right thing and going for it with passion. If you don't have the passion and the willingness to commit, as you've heard, you need to commit a lot of time. I do a lot of mentoring, and sometimes young people will come to me and go, yeah, I really want to do this, and oh, but I can only do 30 hours. I can only do 40 hours. Then don't do it. You don't have enough drive. You don't have enough passion. You've got to be willing to give it everything you've got. I sure did. And people look today and go, oh, wow, it's pretty easy, overnight success. No, there were years where I had my credit cards maxed out and I couldn't get the bank loans, as Brian said. One thing you learn early in your business years, when you want a loan, the banks aren't so willing to loan you money. When you get further along and you don't need them anymore, they're really willing to give you money. There's something wrong about that.
That's called only giving you an umbrella when the sun shines.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway. I could go on and on, but I think for the sake of it, I'll conclude this way in saying, and again, I don't mean this arrogantly, and I am very humble and very appreciative of where we are today. But I have nearly 1,100 employees now across the 11 businesses. I've got businesses in Illinois, in Ohio, down in Florida. We'll do about $500 million of business this year. The interesting thing that not being a college student and maybe all the math you guys have had only a few years ago, and I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I mean, I've taught myself how to read financial statements and those sort of things. But a few years ago, I started looking at our growth, and I talk about 37 years of growing. What I didn't tell you is for the last couple decades, we've been growing on average about 20% a year. And if you take 20% a year, it takes less than 4 years, you double in size. And that's just math. When we do building, people think we're always building at Sweetwater, which is kind of true. We're always building. I moved in with 40,000 square feet. I've got 350,000 square feet here soon. But it's because I probably didn't forecast well enough or didn't have enough guts when I looked at how we were growing. Is that going to continue to grow? Can I really count on in 4 years or less than 4 years we'll double in size? Last year, I took every year we have a management retreat. We take all of our lead people, and that year we were about $350 million. And I said, based on the 20% growth that we've been having on average for year after year after year, by the year 2020, we're a $1 billion company. Now, I'm not saying that's our goal. Don't know if we'll get there, but man, that's a long ways away from the VW bus to be even thinking about the number of $1 billion. And my challenge to the employees was, are you ready to be in $1 billion company? I know I've not been in one. I guess Brian has been, but I've not been in $1 billion company, and I don't even know what that takes. And so I wanted to challenge all my leaders to make sure that they're educated correctly, or if they need additional help, or they need other tools, what do we need to do? Because based on history, that seems to be where we're going as a company. And oh, by the way, we didn't grow 20% last year. We grew 28% last year, which speeds up that process. And this year we're growing about 27%, and our best few months will be the rest of October, November, and December. So we might get to that number even earlier if the rate continues. And again, I'm not saying that as a goal. I'm just saying that's kind of the path of how things are going based on previous sales. The other interesting little thing, I had that talk with everybody last October. We came back to the day after Thanksgiving. Everybody know what that day's called? Black Friday, that's right. Well, you think it all happens here in town at Target and Walmart. It happens huge on the internet. We went on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday being Cyber Monday, where in normal days, we do about 4,000 orders a day. Well, instantly on that Friday morning, we turned it around and we were doing 10,000 orders a day. That means 6,000 more boxes had to be packed and taped. Every one was an individual customer. We teach that all the time. It's not about the number of orders. Every one of those is going into someone's home, someone's school, recording studio, and you got to make sure when they open that box, there's a wow factor, which is why every order goes out with a handful of candy. That's our sweet little way of saying thank you. But over those 4 days, we were doing 10,000 orders a day. We did a run rate for 4 days of over $1 billion of business. Now, my employees couldn't do that for 365 days, but I was thrilled that our systems stood up, our information systems, our websites, all that sort of thing for at least 4 days. So our future looks really, really bright at Sweetwater and all the other companies, and I think it's really all about doing the right thing for our employees, doing the right thing for our customers, and just doing the right thing all the time. Mike.
We are going to have just a quick question session. There's a microphone right here. If you have a question, please come down right now and ask that. Don't be bashful. Come on down. What was it? There was some show where they always were saying, come on down. But seriously,
Price is Right.
I don't want to have to ask the questions. I will tell you this, while these guys are all my personal friends, they are car nuts just like me.
Hello. And this goes for all of you guys or whoever wants to answer, but if there was one piece of advice you had to give us all in order to be a successful entrepreneur or businessman or whatever it may be that we are passionate about, what would it be?
Do the right thing. Don't give up. Have passion. You know, one of the things I would tell you when I started my company, 1979, in my VW bus, rubbing two nickels together, I would talk to bankers, accountants, and they'd go, a recording studio in a VW bus in Fort Wayne, Indiana? They didn't get it. You know, they just absolutely didn't get it, and that's not their fault. They weren't the ones with the passion, and they didn't understand what I saw in my mind, but clearly they all said, you need to go to LA, you need to go to Nashville. They did not have the vision that I had in my head. So just because others don't see the vision, heck, my mom and dad for 25 years kept saying, when are you going to get a real job? They finally quit asking me that a few years ago, but they don't have the vision that you have. And so don't take that as of them disapproving. They just don't understand. They don't know the language any more than you probably don't know Chinese or Latin, right? So if you believe in it, go for it.
You have to love what you do.
Absolutely.
I'm 79 years old, and I'm still there all the time. I enjoy it. I love it.
Well, let me tell you, Chuck, being your banker at that earlier stage, I'll tell you, if you don't bet on the people, you don't necessarily bet on the numbers on the balance sheet. And I always found in banking that if you pick a good horse, you're always going to win. I think you have a question?
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm an MBA student here, and I also work as an application engineer in an entrepreneur team in a big organization, and we're trying to promote a new product to the market. It's not similar to any traditional ones, but you know we've tried for a year and a half, and so I have started to have some doubts. You know, is this the right product for the market? Is it overpriced? Is this too much technology that the market is not ready for it yet? So my question is, how do you know when you know you're wrong, that you have to switch paths? Or how do you know if it's something that you should keep moving on or change direction?
I don't answer them all.
I think it's important that you don't it's easy to get married to a strategy because you're so, and this is a risk of mine too, you're so passionate about it and you think this has to be the right thing to do. I would look to those around you and also take a step back because you get so much invested in it. You see it with scientists, you see it with economists. They get so invested in something they're studying that they lose the vision and they lose the ability to be objective when you analyze it. So I would just, if it's been a year and a half, it's probably time to, you know, I'm not a fashion designer, but if we design something specifically and it doesn't sell for a year and a half, the consumers probably don't want it. So, or we haven't gotten in front of the right audience to purchase it.
Yeah, I just add to that, you know, to me, business is an art and a science. And one of the things you have to know in business is the art of the pivot, which basically is a fancy way of saying know when to pivot your product and know, like, you got to identify and solve a problem for a customer. They don't want to buy your stuff. I mean, Chuck did. You know, you had customers that had a problem with getting stuff on time, right, to their concerts and a whole bunch of other things, and problems with their sound systems. We've all had to identify and solve a problem. If you're not solving a problem for a customer, you're not in business. So, you know, figure out the art of the pivot, but again, it's sometimes an art, not a science.
And I would say, is it trending? Is it trending where you think it will be successful, and when is that date? When will you cross it? If it's not trending positive and you can't make a change to make it start trending towards positive, if you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, then maybe it is time. But trending is really important to me. So.
Thank you. Next question.
Good afternoon. What makes Indiana an attractive state to start a business?
Eric, this one's yours.
Yeah, this is my softball question.
Did you plant this question?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, you know, I've had the privilege over the last 2.5 years to be the president of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which really our job is to sell Indiana nationally and internationally. And then now that I'm back home, I have the privilege of selling Allen County and this region nationally and internationally. There's a couple things. One of the things that we have is we're in the middle of everywhere. So a lot of people like to say that we're in the middle of nowhere if you're from Indiana, right? We're a bunch of cornfields, very low bar of expectation for Indiana. But when you look at the population of the United States, and again, what we talk about, it's all about the people, right? The population of the United States is in our backyard. We're literally 80% of the population is within a 1 day's drive of us. So we have to, we can sell proximity to markets. And then we also have a great governmental environment for business and for growth. In fact, we used to go to Illinois and give speeches where we'd say to a business community, we wake up every day in Indiana trying to embarrass Illinois into better performance, and the business community would give us a standing ovation. Because their idea of customer service in Illinois as a government is very low. They do not service their customer. They do not see businesses as their customer. They see their businesses as a revenue source, but not a customer. So we really work hard to make sure that our businesses know we see them as a customer. Now, having said that, we have some challenges, and one of them is we have a population growth issue, and meaning that we do a great job with our talent that's here, but we don't have a free agent market much. And so we're really trying to improve our product all the time. In Fort Wayne, in Indianapolis, in Evansville, and South Bend, we're trying to improve our product in each region so that we're a more attractive place for talent to come and live and do business.
And I think it's wonderful people with good work ethics. Indiana's got great people.
Yes.
It's been great for my company. We've relocated about half of our 1,100 employees from all over the country to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And, when I start talking about the true quality of life, most of you are probably from around here and we're used to it. But, I've had the fortunate ability, as most of us have, to travel around the country. And there's a lot of great things in Fort Wayne. You can afford homes. I have people that move here from California. They can't even afford a down payment out there. And the down payment in California literally buys a house in Indiana. And the relatively low rate of crime. And if you want to do something, we have a lot of great things in our community, but if you want to do something different, you are only 3 hours from Chicago and 2 from Indianapolis and 3 from Detroit. And I think Fort Wayne is just a fabulous, fabulous place. And I've banked my personal life and my business on staying here and growing here. And as Eric said, also from a shipping and receiving point of view, we're very close to a huge, huge majority of our customers right out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I could sell you all day long on it. And I think Fort Wayne specifically is really getting our swagger. All the stuff that's getting built downtown and things we're talking about with the riverfront, maybe an arena and all those sort of things. I think for you young people, this is just an amazing, amazing community to be able to stay in and live in and have a great life. I think also with the tools that are available today, I think from an entrepreneur and business point of view, I'm so jealous and envious. I wish I'd have had the kind of tools when I started that you have available at your fingertips today. You can bring the whole world back to Fort Wayne. You can absolutely learn and Google and search and all that sort of stuff. And you can start, lots of businesses have been started out of this area, this region. I think you've just got some fabulous tools and abilities right now.
One last question.
Good afternoon. I actually have 2 questions, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Don't ask for permission, just do it.
Just do it, that's right.
Hey, don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay, the first is, without all of your guys' success, what's the most valuable lesson each one of you has learned?
You want to go first?
The most valuable lesson thus far I've learned is at every stage in life, always serve others and build relationships. And, I probably started the snow shoveling by just doing it for my neighbors for free because my dad said go out and help our neighbors who don't want to go out and shovel their snow or they're elderly or something like that. So you don't do things for the money, you do it because you have passion about it and build relationships with people. I was in New York a couple weekends ago and meeting with some people, and one of the people randomly, I had helped his brother get tickets to a concert 10 years ago. And so you just constantly try and give to people, give to others, be generous. And when you are blessed, give more because it'll come back.
I really have narrowed it down to the 3 G's. Grit is my favorite because it requires perseverance plus passion. That's grit. And then the second is gratitude. If you're not a grateful person, man, I see so many people in life that aren't grateful. They're complaining, they're griping, they're moaning. Yes, they're bitching. And I get tired of it. So I focus on grit, gratitude, and then growth. If you don't have a growth mindset, man, the thing I love about America is you're only limited by your own imagination, your ability to execute. That's all that limits you. So to me, it boils down to those 3 G's. Those are my life's, kind of theme right now is grit, gratitude, and growth.
You've got to be willing for change today, too. Change is so rapid today. You can't get complacent in what you do.
Thank you. Then the second question is more of a personal question for me. What's your guys' take or outlook on the car company Tesla?
Wow. I drive one. I drive one. Yeah, I love it. You know what I think is amazing about Tesla? Obviously, Elon Musk must be a brilliant guy. But he started this new car company, and he's competing against companies that have been doing it for 100 years. So you would have thought no one could ever come out and compete against Ford, Chrysler, you know, that sort of thing. And he just had the perseverance. He had a better idea, or at least a different idea. I don't know if it's better yet. I don't know what the long-term stability of batteries and all that's a whole other story. But to bring a car out and be just competitive with the big three, and let alone the German guys, and I mean, that's pretty amazing to me. And it's a great car. It's an absolutely great car. So.
Actually, they're now copying him.
Actually, I will tell you this. I put version 7.0 software in it last night, right? Version 7.0 software. Anybody know what that means? Any guys into Tesla yet? 7.0 software means my car has autopilot. I drove from Sweetwater up 69 today with my hands not on the steering wheel, and it follows the lanes on the road. It slows down the car in front of you. It then switches to the other lane. It was blowing my mind, and I'm a technology geek, right? Wow. But it absolutely did it. Now, on my gravel road outside my house, it kind of wanted to go into gravel, so it's still got some learning curves. But it's just amazing that a company could come up with something we thought was, you know, there's always a new idea. And I think Elon Musk proved that the way he's approaching the electric car is a different idea than what the big three guys had done. So.
But I want to again thank my panel. Great job, guys. And I appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
I would like to thank all of you in the audience for taking some time out of a busy day, and yet I think when you look at your life, this hour could be worth an awful lot to you. Learn from people that they said they weren't instant overnight successes, but they sure have been successes. So thank you very much for coming. You're dismissed. Have a great day.